Hello guys! So for today's video, we will have something educational naman. So kung napanood nyo na yung first video ko, so focus siya more on sa laugh trip, good vibes, and kulitan lang. So ngayon, medyo magiging educational naman tayo. So ang vlog na to ay about sa variables, one of the topics na dinidiscuss sa practical research ito. So sa mga estudyante dyan, so maybe this video can help you. So enjoy watching! For this video lesson, we will be discussing variables, its definition, the 6 common types of variables, and the other types of variables. Our most essential learning competency is to differentiate kinds of variables and their uses. For our learning objectives, at the end of the discussion, the learners will be able to identify the 6 common types of variables, explain and determine the difference between independent and dependent variable, and make a diagram showing the different types of variables. For your first activity, you are going to guess the word, unscramble the letters, and reveal the mystery words. You may write your answers in a piece of paper. So now, let us reveal the mystery words. So we have variables, independent, extraneous, moderator, dependent, intervening, and control. So class, the independent, extraneous, moderator, dependent, intervening, and control variables are the 6 common types of variables. Now, let's define variables. These are changing qualities or characteristics of persons or things. Examples of these are age, gender, intelligence, ideas, achievements, confidence, and so on that are involved in your research study. Made up of root or base word vary, which means to undergo changes or differ from. Variables have different or varying values in relation to time and situation. For instance, as years go by, your age or intelligence increases, but being placed in a situation where you are afflicted with a disease or have no means of reading or no access to any source of knowledge, your intelligence tend to decrease. As mentioned in our first activity, we have 6 common types of variables. These are independent, dependent, intervening, moderator, control, and extraneous variables. Let's first discuss independent and dependent variables. Independent variables are those that cause changes in the subject, while dependent variables are those that bear or manifest the effects caused by independent variables. For you to have a clear and better understanding of these 2 types of variables, let's integrate it to mathematics, specifically solving problems by substitution method. Given the formula y is equal to 2x plus 1, and the values of x, which are 2, 4, 8, 10, 12, 15, and 20, your math teacher will then ask you to find the values of y. By doing so, you'll get the following values of y: 5, 9, 17, 21, 25, 31, and 41. As you may observe, the values of y depend on the values of x. Therefore, we may represent x as the independent variable and y as the dependent variable. Hence, in causal relationship, The cause comes from the independent variable, the effect on the dependent variable. Let's take, for example, this particular study on the effect of studying in the academic performance of students. So we have two variables which are studying and academic performance. From this particular situation, we can determine that studying is the independent variable and academic performance is the dependent variable because studying greatly affects academic performance. In another example, we have the effect of diet and exercise on the physical fitness of individuals. Similarly, we have two variables which are diet and exercise and physical fitness. From this particular situation, we can determine that diet and exercise is the independent variable, while physical fitness is the dependent variable, because diet and exercise affects the physical fitness of individuals. Now, let's have intervening variable. It is a hypothetical variable used to explain causal links between other variables. Intervening variables cannot be observed in an experiment, that's why they are hypothetical. For example, there is an association between being poor and having a shorter lifespan. Just because someone is poor doesn't mean that will lead to an early death. So other hypothetical variables are used to explain the phenomenon. These intervening variables could include lack of access to healthcare or poor nutrition. At this point, we now focus on control variables and moderator variables. Control variables are variables that are held constant. These help to identify the possible differences in the outcomes as a result of controlling certain variables, while moderator variables are variables that delineate how a relationship of interest changes under different conditions or circumstances. Moderator variables may be quantitative or qualitative in nature. Let's look at this example on the study regarding the effect of playing music in the academic performance of students. We have here our students playing music and academic performance. From this particular situation, we are able to identify that playing music is our independent variable as it might influence the academic performance of the students. A possible moderator variable would be the genre of music that is playing. Remember that a moderator variable introduces change in the results if done in a different situation or conditions. As such, we try to identify which particular genre of music, whether classical music or rock music, would be effective in terms of improving the academic grade of the students. Now, a possible control variable would be the class duration, which is 60 minutes per class. Regardless whether your class is exposed to classical music or rock music, both groups will have the same duration of class in order to determine the possible effects of music exposure to the students. Now, let's have extraneous variables. Extraneous variables are variables that are already existing during the conduct of an experiment. These variables could influence the results of the study. As such, as much as possible must be controlled because they can offer an alternative result. Take note that these are variables which are already existing or extra variables that are already existing. Hence, we have the term extraneous variables. Let's go back to our example earlier on the study regarding the effect of playing music in the academic performance of the students. We have playing music as our independent variable and academic performance as our dependent variable. A possible extraneous variables that might influence or change the result would be noise, another would be ventilation, and lighting. Noise, of course, would cause a distraction to the students, hence, they would not be able to focus properly, even if they are exposed to classical music or rock music. Whereas ventilation and lighting must result to a change in the atmosphere which would result to the students feeling uncomfortable in terms of studying in that particular area, regardless whether they are exposed to classical music or rock music. In both situations, noise, ventilation, and lighting are considered extraneous variables because if they are not controlled, they might offer a different result that is not expected in the study itself. For your next task, you are going to identify the independent and dependent variables in each research problem. Write your answer under the right column. Now, let's identify the independent and dependent variables in each research problem. Let's have number 1. How does logical thinking develop critical thinking? Our independent variable is logical thinking, and critical thinking is our dependent variable. For number 2, what are the effects of Korean novelas on the Filipino value system? So we have Korean novelas as independent variable and Filipino value system as our dependent variable. For number 3, in what way does collaborative learning increase communicative competence? We have collaborative learning as our independent variable and communicative competence as our dependent variable. To what extent does texting decrease the student's grammatical competence? We have texting as our independent variable and grammatical competence as our dependent variable. What corrupt practices trigger up one's resignation? We have corrupt practices as our independent variable and resignation as our dependent variable. Now, we will have the different types of data being used as variables in a study. So we have the categorical variable and numerical variables. Let's first discuss numerical variables. These are variables with values that describe a measurable numerical quantity. It answers the questions how many or how much, meaning to say that numeric variables are considered quantitative data. Numeric variables are further divided into two types, which are interval variables and discrete variables. Interval variables assume any value between a certain set of real numbers depending on the scale used, while discrete variables can only assume any whole value within the limits of the given variables. Some of the examples of interval variables can be time. If we're going to observe in time, we do not only look into hours, we also recognize the existence of minutes and seconds. Age can also be an example because in between the age of 10 and 11, we recognize that there are people who are 10 and a half and 10 and 3/4. Weight is also an example because we do not only focus on whole numbers for the weight, we also have grams and milligrams in between. And finally, another example of interval variable could be the height. Because we do not only look at the feet, we also consider the centimeters and inches. Take note that interval variables recognize the value between the whole numbers. Now, let's proceed with the discussion of discrete variables. Discrete variables, unlike the interval variables that recognize the existence of values in between whole numbers, only focus on the whole numbers itself. Some examples could be class attendance, number of establishment in an area, and number of children in the family. Again, note that discrete variables are whole numbers because remember, in class attendance, we do not have half a student as well as in the number of children in the family. We do not have 2.5 children in the family. It always recognizes that values are that of a whole number. The next variable is the categorical variable. These are variables with values that describe a quality or characteristic of a data unit. Pretty much it answers the questions what type or which category. Hence, we have the term categorical. Now, unlike the numeric variables, categorical variables are qualitative in nature. and are further divided into four types, which are ordinal variables, nominal variables, dichotomous variables, and polytomous variables. Let's first talk about the ordinal variables. Ordinal variables can take a value which can be logically ordered or ranked. Some examples would be clothing size, academic ranking, levels of satisfaction, and salary scale. Take note of the operative terms, which are values that can be logically ordered and ranked. Some of these examples would explain that a person who is size extra small is ranked differently than that of someone who is a smaller size. Take note that it gradually gets bigger in terms of the ranking. Similarly, in terms of academic ranking, a person who ranked first is different than someone who ranked second. In terms of level of satisfaction, of course, a person who is very satisfied has different level compared to someone who is simply satisfied or someone who is actually very dissatisfied. In the simplest terms, ordinal variables serve the purpose of classification and ranking. Now, let's proceed to nominal variables. Nominal variables, unlike ordinal variables wherein the values can be arranged logically in terms of ranking, have values which cannot be organized in a logical sequence. Some examples would be learning styles, language spoken, blood type, and plate numbers. Now, you might be thinking, plate numbers have numbers in them. Are they supposed to be numerical variables or ordinal variables? Well, the answer is no, because plate numbers serve the purpose of nominal variables, which is for the purpose of identification. Remember that plate numbers are unique in order to identify the vehicle that is assigned to. Similar to your blood type. Blood type A is different from blood type B. However, having blood type A doesn't mean that you are greater than a person having blood type B. In terms of learning styles, being a visual learner doesn't mean you're greater than someone who is musical or auditory learner. Its purpose is to identify what learning styles will serve you best. In terms of the language spoken, learning or speaking one particular language doesn't mean that you are greater than all the others. It's simply for the purpose of identifying which country you came from. Before we proceed, let's sum up the differences and similarities between ordinal variables and nominal variables. Ordinal and nominal variables are both categorical. However, ordinal variables can be organized or ranked, while nominal variables would be for identification purposes only. Let's now proceed with the other categorical variables, which are dichotomous variables and polytomous variables. Dichotomous variables are variables that represent only two categories. Examples would be yes or no choice, true or false, or even sex, male or female. Whereas polytomous variables are variables that have many categories. Examples would be performance level and educational attainment. Take note of the operative terms between the two. Dichotomous variables would only have two categories, while polytomous variables would have many possible categories. For your third task, you are going to make a diagram showing the different types of variables. It must contain keywords that describe each type. You may use any shapes or figures for representations. And for your assignment, identify the independent and dependent variables on the different titles. Kindly visit the link below in order for you to have an access on it. These are my references. Thank you and God bless.
Nagustuhan nyo ba yung video na to? So don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell para lagi kayong updated sa next video uploads ko. Bye!